Hi guys, it's Amy and it's Fabulous Friday. I've literally just come in from sixth form. Pretty much walked in the door like just a minute ago, so I'm a little bit out of breath and but I knew I had to do this video now, otherwise I'd never do it. So okay, so here goes. This week we're going to be talking about guilt and how to deal with the guilt of hurting other people when you are suffering with a mental health illness. And I actually came up with a topic for this week. And I came up with it a few weeks before I went back to school, based on the guilt I've been feeling for the past 6 months hurting somebody who was a teacher in my school, who I felt very, very close to, and after I overdosed and she didn't want to talk to me. And I've been living for the past 6 months with that guilt, and although it hasn't completely faded yet, I have learned to slowly but surely eliminate those guilty feelings, and I'm going to kind of explain to you how I did that, and hoping it will help you in regard to eating. Obviously, I have made other people upset through my self-destructive behaviours, through my eating disorder and the anorexia and the depression. I've upset parents, I've upset friends, and I've lost friends, and I've upset my boyfriend. I do still wonder why my boyfriend is still with me, but hey, what can you do? And obviously after, you know, when I fell ill with anorexia, it was very well hidden. So it wasn't the fact of hiding it from people, although I'm going to use my experiences of the overdose to explain how I dealt with the guilt of hurting those around me. You're more likely to feel guilt from hurting somebody close to you, because it's natural. It's natural to feel that way, you know, because it's not just you that's hurting. Now you've brought somebody else into the equation, and it was something that you didn't want to do in the first place, and so that can be really, really hard to cope with. And I remember this teacher in particular didn't want to talk to me at all after I overdosed because she couldn't cope. And I found out later on that she'd actually went into psychotherapy, which affected me in such a huge way because I felt like everything was my fault, and she went into counselling because of me, and I found it so difficult because I just did. But I guess with her in particular, having that time away from her, obviously I was out of education for 6 months, and having that time away from her really, really helped me to put things into perspective. And I think it's helped her as well, and I think it's helped her to cope and maybe make light of it and understand. So maybe in terms of feeling guilty, maybe like a bit of breathing space and a bit of time away from the person would actually do you both a lot of good. It depends obviously who you're hurting. I think sometimes with Nathan as well, my boyfriend, I just wanted time to myself, and I think he understood that in some respects, and having that time to think and reflect allowed him to have time to think and reflect, and then the time between me and my teacher had the same impact. So I think in terms of dealing with guilt, time apart from that person does help, so they can reflect on what's happening, because if you are constantly in the same, you know, circumstances as the person who is suffering, then it can be really, really hard and really demanding. And I remember when I was first put on antidepressants, I actually stayed at my boyfriend's house for a whole week and I didn't go home. I'd had a huge argument with my parents and I went away for a week. I mean, my boyfriend lives around the corner anyway, but I went and stayed with Nathan for the whole week, and I didn't go home because I knew I needed that space away from them, for them to reflect and for them to think. So I think that really, really helps. Also as well, you have to put into perspective that it's the person who deals with their emotions in a negative way, and people cope with things in different ways, and it's their coping mechanisms that are struggling, and it's not you that is pushing them to that. Obviously people are going to be upset if you continue to self-destruct, and that's natural, but what happens after that is not your problem. It's not, you can't control the way that they deal with their emotions, and it's taken me a long time to realise that. In regard to the psychotherapy that my teacher's is, I don't know if she's still having it, I haven't had the chance to speak to her since I got back, but I felt like it was all my fault, and I was convinced that maybe it was useful for her to have that psychotherapy, not just because of what happened to me and the way that she dealt with that, but maybe to prepare her for other situations in the future where she may not be able to cope as well as maybe she thought she would. And it's, you know, it's therefore, by this happening to me, has therefore enabled her to get some help to prepare her for later on events that she might not be able to cope with as well. It also shows that person as a sign that maybe they can't cope with things as well as they thought they could, and maybe they need a little bit of help to deal with that. And that's not your problem. In a way, by doing that, you're actually maybe helping them to decipher their emotions and get some feeling out of them, and maybe allow them to find emotions that they never had done before. And another way to deal with a guilty relative or parent is to be as open as possible. You know, I tried after my overdose to tell my mum and dad how I was feeling, and it's really, really difficult and it's not easy. But we had family therapy, and we worked through how they could identify when I was having a bad day, when I wasn't feeling up to eating food, when I was a bit low, when I wasn't feeling my best, and I learned how to tell them things like that, so they weren't just left kind of sitting in the dark wondering what had happened, and they weren't then feeling guilty because they couldn't do anything to help me. Another thing is also reassurance, and I know sometimes that's easier said than done. Sorry, I just realised it was raining. I just looked out the window and I was like, shit, it's raining. I know it's all easier said than done, but I guess in the past 6 months I have, you know, my parents are okay with me at the moment. They felt horrific for the first 2 weeks of my overdose, and I think the best thing to do with that is to maybe educate. They felt guilty because they didn't notice, but what they didn't know about depression is it's a largely hidden illness, as well as a lot of common eating disorders. And maybe I think people sometimes think that depression and eating disorders and other mental health issues are open disorders, and people can easily recognise them with those disorders, and they can't. And you need to kind of reassure them that it is a very, very closed illness, that it's not easily recognisable, and there was nothing in their power that they could have done. The reason why you didn't tell them how it was hurting you was because you didn't want to hurt them, and that you care for them and that you love them. And I think constant reassurance to them that you're going to be getting better, you're going to be on your way, on your road to recovery, will help them to feel a lot more at ease. And if you even keep them updated, I mean, I kept my mum updated with the progress I was making in my recovery, and I just said, you know, Mum asked me, you know, what, you know, your therapist Linda, she was just like, you know, have you seen Linda today? And she asked me how it went, and I didn't obviously tell her like the whole details that we talked about, but I talked about some things that, you know, that could reassure her and that could make her feel a little bit more at ease. And I'm talking at the speed of lightning today. Dealing with guilt is not fun. It's not good, and I spent the last 6 months dealing with the guilt of hurting my teacher. And oh god, if she ever watches this, she knows how sorry I am. I rung her at the school and she didn't respond to my calls. I wrote her letters. I went to see her in her office crying my eyes out. I did everything in my power to apologise and let her know that I was sorry, and that I needed, if I could turn back time I would. But I think that space between us, and we've had time to think things through, and maybe she's had time to look into it a little bit more and discover that it wasn't easily recognisable. She couldn't have done anything to stop me from taking the overdose. She couldn't have done anything to help, and sometimes that's what you've got to recognise. I actually didn't come up with a plan for this video. I normally kind of plan my videos out. Because I was in a bit of a rush today, I haven't actually done so. And I feel a little bit bad for that, because this video has been very, very rushed. And considering it was my idea for this video, it has been really rushed, but I hope you can understand that, yeah, things have just been a bit kind of haywire at the moment. I've been dealing with some depressive moods, and even though I kind of picked myself back up a little bit today, who knows, I never know what I'm going to be like in the evening. It could go back downhill again. So and yeah, I think kind of take some of the advice that I've given you on board, about having space, about being open, about being honest, about allowing the people around you to recognise when there's something wrong, and maybe educate them. I think educating is really important to somebody who's feeling guilty, because like I say, about it being quite a closed illness and it's not very open. And I think that helped my parents understand that there was nothing they could do, and maybe eliminated some of that guilt, so that they were feeling, and obviously if they weren't feeling guilty, that I wasn't feeling that guilty. So, I'm sorry this has been such a rubbish video. I will try and work really, really hard on a more constructive one next week, but until then, I hope this has been of some importance and some interest to you. If not, then I apologise, and I'm sure you can check out the other girls' videos and they'll be amazing. Okay, so I love you all, and I'll see you next Friday. Bye!